right, good to see you. My name's Kurt. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, welcome. Welcome to Brentview. Welcome to this family, this church, and we're going to jump in today. You guys ready? Yeah, okay. Hopefully the talking got you warmed up because we've got somewhere to go today. This won't surprise you, I don't think, but the North American church has a problem, and if we don't address it, it's going to get worse. That's just the truth. In fact, the stat is this, and some of you who were with us for our volunteer day might remember this. Throw it on the screen here. One in two people who are young will drift from the church once they move into college. 1 out of 2. So if you were to look at our youth group on a Wednesday night and you just said, hey, half of you go here, half of you go there, the group that's over there, no longer Christian by the time they've gotten into their early 20s. That is a problem. It's a huge problem. And you know, sometimes it seems like Christians don't think it's a problem practically. You know, it's like, oh, well, what can we do? How can we even help? And the truth is there's a lot we can do if we choose to. And that's what I really want to press into, because if we do nothing, we are going to eventually find ourselves in a situation where the legacy we want to pass to our children, to the children of other people, our grandchildren, etc., that legacy is going to be thinner than ever. And this isn't just about kids that grow up in church. I mean, imagine if that's a stat for kids who actually come to church, imagine how hard it's going to be for people who are part of families that never come to church, unless hopefully they're invited, right? So this is a hard reality, and we need to stare it in the face and say, that's a problem. And we probably need to stare it in the face and even go a bit further and say, what if we were a community of people who said, not on our watch? You know, and there's a lot of reasons for this that we could look at, you know. If we were going to look at what's contributing to this trend, like what's really going on here. And these are just blanket statements. They're more nuanced, and I won't have time to unpack everything. But here's a few things that studies and experience really show us. The first one is kids. Kids are growing up in emotionally and spiritually under-resourced families. That's just reality. Kids are growing up in families that, parents are bringing their stuff, and that's understandable because there are cycles and cycles of trauma and pain and things that, as parents, are brought into the family system, and if they are not addressed, they will be under-resourced. Teenagers. If we think about teenagers, they're on a quest for figuring out who they are and where they belong. And what are they experiencing on a regular basis? Not every teenager, but lots of teenagers are experiencing despair and depression in a huge, huge number. Young adults. Maybe you've known a young adult who does walk away from the church. Here's some of the things that, if we were just to collect a lot of the stories and a lot of the data, I summarize it this way. Young adults walk away from the church because they inherited a faith rooted in, and I want you to hear this, unbiblical legalism, hypocrisy, and a posture of anti-intellectualism. This is a problem. You want to know why young adults leave? It's these sorts of reasons. It's not because the Jesus story isn't compelling. It's not because God isn't good. It's the version of the Jesus story they told wasn't as compelling as it should have been. And the God that they came to know was an angry judge or an aloof grandpa, just sort of like, right? Either extreme. It's not the God of the Bible. And so what do we do with this? And I already alluded to this, but parents are struggling, right? Like parents struggle to find emotional and spiritual health in their lives and marriages, which negatively will impact the kids under their care. And let me say something. Parents, wherever you are in that journey, you need to hear something. God sees you. God sees you. This isn't a moment to feel judged. This isn't a moment to feel like I'm not enough. It's a moment to say, what I do and how I deal with my stuff matters. It's not just me holding all of that stress and, someday I'll deal with it. It's in this moment right now. You may not even notice, but your child is picking up your stress, your pain, your sorrow, your suffering. And the gospel says you don't have to live that way. The kingdom of God is about saying, those things pass away, the chains on my soul are gone, and I can find freedom. I can discover something so much more. And so parents, if you are in this room, you need to know you are loved, you are seen, and you can do it. But you need a community of people, and you need God, and you need resources. You can't do it by yourself. And you know what ultimately you probably need? Is a posture that says, I'm willing to actually name that this is hard. Friends, it is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard. But we're invited to hand down the goodness of Jesus from this moment, this generation. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to be a parent to be part of this. Grandparents, uncles, aunts, just people who are part of this congregation, every stage of life, every age, every background. We all have a part to play in both resourcing the home and coming alongside young people in the church. And if we do that, my friends, I believe that we can be part of turning the trend a different direction. And if we don't, we've lost a moment that's available to us. And so much more. So what can we do? What can we do to make a real difference at home and in our church family? And that's really what we want to explore. What difference can we actually make when it comes to thinking about the fact that with culture, where it's at, the pressures that people are facing, it doesn't matter what life stage you're in, by the way, you're facing a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of turmoil because the world keeps changing. And here's the thing that's really hard for some of us. The world we grew up in was much more comfortable. It was much more hospitable to a particular version of Christianity. It was much more public, that everyone sort of thought like I did and felt like I did. And here's the deal. That's nice. But you want to know something that's really true? When you read the Gospels and when you read the book of Acts, that's not the world the church was born into. So if we don't see this moment, a moment where we're not necessarily like the ones who are shaping culture in the way that maybe we did in the past as Christianity, here's the deal. We're set up more like the book of Acts than ever before. We're set up more like Jesus and the apostles than ever before. To say resurrection means something fundamentally changed in the world. And if we are part of that and we have the Spirit of Jesus in our lives, difference is what we actually have to offer. And that's good news. That's really good news. The opportunity is now. And you know, in this series, we're going to look at 4 different commitments that we can make together. 6 different commitments that we can make over 6 weeks to make an impact at home and at church. And by the way, young people were not a big deal in the ancient world. I think we really need to know this, that in the ancient world, until you had a function where you could contribute to society, children were seen as less than or sometimes equal to, and this will sound terrible, or equal to women. I know. That sounds terrible, right? But you've got to understand the ancient world. The ancient world was set up for Roman citizens stood at the top, and if they had beards, they had authority. And then the whole sort of pyramid of organizing life sort of went down from there, and just above a slave was a child in that system. Now, Judaism was a slight bit better, but not much. And so you can imagine when Jesus talks about children, the sort of gusto that these words would have. There's one in Matthew 18 I want to share with you that sort of frames our time together today. Matthew 18 says this, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. As for whoever causes these little ones who believe in me to trip and fall into sin, it would be better for them to have a huge stone hung around their necks and to be drowned in the bottom of the lake." Jesus takes this pretty seriously. Now, he's using hyperbole, obviously. He's not like thinking this is a good idea. But what he's trying to say is like, look, you are going to be judged by how you treat the youngest and most vulnerable among you. That's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And here's the thing, we already do this pretty well. Like, we already are committed to creating space for the young people in our church. We're already committed to helping them grow. And here's the deal. Again, this isn't about just saying, hey, so all we care about is this one demographic? Like, is this all we're doing? No. Please don't go there. We are saying we have an opportunity to come alongside that young demographic, and that is us doing the work of ministry together. Every stage, every moment, every opportunity. And we're going to dissect that a lot over the next several weeks. Because all of us matter. And so our health individually as Christians, our health collectively in group environments, our health across the generations, all of this matters. So it's not about neglecting one group for the other group. It's about saying we're not going to neglect any group, but the most vulnerable among us for this season that we find ourselves in are young people. So what are we going to do collectively to say, not on my watch, not on our watch? The gospel is so much better. The gospel is so much bigger. And so today I want to talk about one of these big ideas. And it's, we're going to use this phrase, keychain leadership. And I remember when I finally took my driver's course. And here's what's really weird. So in California, where I was raised, you take your first written test at 15 and a half, not a day sooner. Here in Alberta, 14? That's crazy talk to me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, 4 years from now, my little Lydia, who was sitting with me until the grade 5 class, I'm apparently going to be like, okay, kid, here you go. Let's try this, right? Like, come on. What's up with that? What's weird? Come on. Let their frontal lobe, develop a little, you know? Gosh. I mean, in the drinking age is 18. That's weird to me too, but that's different talk, right? But here's the deal. The moment came in my life where I was entrusted some keys, and that gave me new access to the world, new authority to oversee and manipulate this very expensive piece of equipment. Maybe you remember your first house key, your first car key, your first opportunity that was given to you. Here's what I want us to think about. It's really to simply say that sometimes the best thing we can do with boundaries in place, with wise guidance in place, with a process in place, is to come alongside people wherever they are in their journey. This can be young people. This could be older people who are just becoming Christian. It applies really across the way. We can totally become people who entrust the keys to people's development. In other words, we entrust the keys. Jesus unlocks the potential. When we say to someone, we see you, we see what you could become, here's a key, here's an opportunity, a metaphorical key to the church in a sense, or key to the home. And if we can become people who hand over authority and opportunity to people within reason, the ownership that comes in a person's life. Wait a second, this is my church? This isn't just a place I show up and they do everything, but I have something as a young person to contribute? Yeah. That shapes faith in such a radical way. And I think the principle would spill over into the home, and we'll talk about that. So when we empower others to lead, especially young people, Jesus unlocks their potential to partner with us in being a church that's for Calgary, for the world, and obviously for one another. So let's jump in a little further. I want to talk about the disciples for the next 10 minutes or so, and I want to talk about their development. Now, the disciples are young adults. We often forget Jesus is only 33 when he is crucified, right? So it's really important that we put this into context. That Jesus is actually just barely not a young adult when he is executed. And the disciples seem to be slightly younger than him, but still starting their trades and all of this. So they're likely in their 20s, we might say. Some people put them in their teens. I'm not sure I agree with that. But it's fascinating because Jesus is going to give keys over. He's going to give opportunities over. He's going to give authority over to this disciple generation that he's raising up. And so in Matthew 16, there's a conversation happening between the apostle, who would become the apostle Peter, and Jesus. And he says this, verse 15, Jesus said, "And what about you? Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Then Jesus replied, "Happy are you, son of Jonah, because no human has shown you this. Rather, my Father who is in heaven has shown you. I tell you, I tell you that you are Peter, and I'll build my church on this rock." And now that's a play on words in the ancient language, because Peter and rock are basically the same word. And so Jesus is saying, hey, you are rocky, and on the rock of Rocky, I'm going to build this church. And what he's saying is, like, you just declared what is true. On the rock of your confession, on the rock of your declaration, your wise statement of the truth that I am indeed the Messiah, the Son of God, this is what I'm going to build everything on. And you've got it right, buddy. You have been paying attention over the course of the journey. And then Jesus says this. He says, the gates of the underworld, or Hades, won't be able to stand against it, the confession, the rock. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Anything you fasten on earth will be fastened in heaven. Anything you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven. What is he saying? He's saying, I'm going to give you my authority. I'm going to give you my power. I'm going to give you something that I have to offer. I'm going to hand it over to you, so that you can carry on the vision, you can carry on the mission. And of course, we see this in action. Jesus rises from the dead, and everything changes. And the early church launches into a big Spirit-empowered deal. And the first sermon given, the Apostle Peter has taken the keys and is proclaiming the good news. And so here's what I want to do. I want to give you, this is a point here on the screen. Jesus names the potential that he sees with a willingness to hand over the keys. Yeah, that rhymed. I tried hard. Yeah. So if you don't remember anything, just remember my rhyme. One rhyme. Yeah. I might have shared this here before. I don't know. So if I did, I apologize. But you weren't all here probably at the same time, so who cares? Some of you heard this. I have this really important memory of going into grade 9. I had been an athlete growing up. I played baseball, basketball, and football. And as I got into middle school, which for us was 7 and 8, I was also getting into skateboarding, and I was trying to figure out who I was. And so I ended up playing less sports over time. And by the time I got into 8th grade, I was just sort of like, I don't know. Maybe athletics were a childhood thing for me. And a man who was a huge deal in my life because his son had been a friend, and in a situation where I had a lot of challenges and brokenness at home. This was like a home away from home kind of family. And Mr. Thomas one day was just walking by me. We were on campus for some reason, and it was right before the football season would start. And he looks at me and he says 3 words, and the words were just this: football, football, football. And he walked away. That was it. Literally, that was all. He just said, football, football, football. I mean, you saw the intensity in his eyes, right? He was going to be an assistant coach and all this stuff. But I'll tell you what he was doing in that moment was calling out my potential for a particular thing that I was about to walk away from. And when he did that, this might not resonate with everybody in the room, but honestly, doing football, those 4 years changed the trajectory of my life. They changed how I saw myself. They changed the relational network I tapped into, the skills and leadership that I was given opportunity to grow in. Those 3 words that were actually just one word. He saw my potential, and he set me on a course that mattered a lot. You see, that's sometimes all we have to do at some stages of the journey. We just call people's potential out and set them on a path. That's what Jesus is doing in this passage. He says, I see your potential, Peter, and you just showed your potential in action. A day is coming when the keys are going to be yours, and so you are going to have the chance to run and pursue my work in a way that you can't even imagine. So, how does Jesus get to that point, right? And of course, we know that's not the end of the story. Peter's going to deny Jesus 3 times. He's going to have to be restored to Jesus after the resurrection. But then Pentecost will come, and Peter's leadership will be clear. Earlier in the story of the Gospels, though, we know that there's a journey that Jesus is taking these guys on. He calls them and says, follow me. I'll make you to be people who don't just fish for fish, but fish for people. And at one point, Jesus in Mark chapter 6 is actually going to send them out for the first time without him physically present. And this is what it says. It says, then Jesus traveled through the surrounding villages teaching. He called for the 12, so the 12 disciples, and sent them out in pairs. He gave them, here's a big word, authority. So he sent them out. He gave them authority over unclean spirits. He instructed them to take nothing for the journey except a walking stick, so no bread, no bags, and no money in their belts. He told them to wear sandals, but not to put on 2 shirts. What's he doing? Jesus is setting them up to go do ministry, and they're going to do it without his supervision for the first time. He's giving some temporary keys to them as they go and proclaim that God's kingdom that the Jewish people had been waiting for forever was arriving in that moment. And so he's going to teach them, he's going to send them, he's going to give them a sense of authority to do the kinds of things that Jesus does. And he's also going to say, you're going to go and you're going to be in simple fashion because we want to see who's actually in this with us, who's going to come alongside you young people and actually be hospitable and do what is necessary when you're in their town. And so Jesus continues and he says, whatever house you enter, remain there until you leave that place. If a place doesn't welcome you or listen to you, as you leave, shake the dust off your feet as a witness against them. So they went out and proclaimed that people should change their hearts and lives, or they should repent. They cast out many demons, and they anointed many sick people with olive oil and healed them. Here's what's just so fascinating, right, about Jesus is he doesn't just say, okay, you just like follow me and like I'm going to just make sure that you're doing every little detail how I would do it and I'm going to make sure that everything's sorted. He actually says, no, I've shown you enough. Go test the skills out. Go test the situation out. Go trust that my Father is going to be with you as you do the kinds of things that I do. And here's the big thing, Jesus doesn't just call people's potential out, but he modeled. Jesus modeled, taught, and sent his disciples as an extension of his authority, and we can too. We can come alongside our children, grandchildren, other family. We can come alongside people who are ready to grow, ready to learn wherever they are in life. And we can together deploy them with the tools they need to possibly stumble, possibly have adversity. But any parent knows that kind of controlled adversity for your kids to have to think through something is actually a really good situation to set your kids up with. If you fix every single problem as a parent, we know how that works out. You kind of become Richie Rich, right? Like you become the kid that doesn't know what it's like to actually need to think through something or need to earn something or need to work for something, right? And so we understand this idea that there's a bit of risk when we do this, but it's good. And so for parents, grandparents, family members, this looks like nurture. It looks like wisdom. It looks like modeling. It looks like authentically putting your faith into practice and inviting the young people in your life to do Likewise, in church, it might look like empowering our young people to take ownership of their faith by bringing their gifts to this congregation. I mean, those are just some of the principles that we can give and also grow in, because none of us are done growing. We could still learn from Jesus. We could still be disciples of Jesus at any stage of our lives. But we have a unique opportunity to entrust the keys, to offer opportunity. Because if we entrust the keys, Jesus will unlock the potential in people who are searching, especially those who are younger. So, one last story. Mark, in the same gospel, tells the story a few chapters later. Now, you need to remember a little bit of background to the story, and it's simply that, do you remember the story of the transfiguration? That's kind of a big word, but the story goes that Jesus took 3 of his closest disciples. Notice again, he's going to go be with the Father, but in this moment, Jesus is like, I'm going to take a few buddies with me. I want them to experience something with me. You know, sometimes coming alongside someone, handing them the keys, simply looks like saying, hey, why don't you come with me? Why don't you just join me in this? You know, it could be that simple, and Jesus models it. And so they go up to this hillside, and they start to pray, and all of a sudden, Jesus has this encounter with God the Father that is so impactful, so beautiful. Elijah and Moses just have to show up and just sort of be there. It's one of the craziest, beautiful stories in the whole gospel account, in my opinion. And God looks at Jesus and said, this is my beloved son, listen to him. So God the Father, in that moment, empowers Jesus and reminds Jesus of his identity as the beloved one. The identity, by the way, that if you are in Christ, you share with Jesus. You are a beloved one. You are one who is worthy of God's love, not because you earned it, but because God sees you as lovable. And so they're having this miraculous experience. They come down the mountain. And when they come down the mountain, there's some commotion. And this is what happens in Mark 9:16 and following. Jesus asked them, the crowd that was kind of stirred up, what are you arguing about? Someone from the crowd responded, teacher, I brought my son to you since he has a spirit that doesn't allow him to speak. Whenever it overpowers him, it throws him into a fit. He foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, and stiffens up. So I spoke to your disciples to see if they could throw it out, but they couldn't. It's really important. We should pause here for a second, right? So earlier in the Gospels, Jesus has sent them out in pairs, and they are doing this stuff. Like they're casting out these evil spirits, they're healing people, they're anointing people, and then like 2 chapters later, another situation shows up. And the disciples collectively, 8 out of the 12, couldn't do the job. Why? Now, Jesus, and I think in English this probably sounds harsher than it was, but here's what it says. In verse 19, Jesus answers them, probably looking at the disciples like, you faithless generation. Like, how long do I have to do this? Like, how long will I be with you? If you've ever been a mentor and you've had that moment like I had when I was mentoring a 14-year-old kid when I was in my own internship days, and then I get a phone call, hey, he's in juvenile hall, he burnt down a field. I'm kind of like Jesus, I get it, like you faithless generation, right? Yeah. How long will I put up with you? Bring him to me. And after an extended struggle, we're not going to read the whole account. Obviously, Jesus will cast out the spirit. But here's the last couple of lines that I think are really important to the story for us today. And it's this. After Jesus went into a house, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we throw this spirit out? Jesus answered, throwing this kind of spirit out requires prayer. Now, I doubt that they didn't pray while they were trying to do this, right? But remember the story in the context of the rest of that sort of unit of gospel. Where has Jesus just come from? He's come from the mountaintop. He's come from a deep encounter of his Father's love. He's come from the most intimate experience I could ever imagine as a human being experiencing with God. One of those moments that changes every moment. And it's because of his prayer life. It's because of his devotion. It's because of his openness. It's because of his pattern of going and being alone or taking a few into loneliness to find God that he was empowered. He was ready when this situation came. He had more resource, more possibility, more openness to do the thing that his disciples were not quite ready to do. And he says, here's the reason why. I was just on a mountain and I was praying. Here's the thing. He doesn't give up on them. He shows them the next step in their own development. He reminds them, hey, this is a fundamental key. You must be people who are saturated in prayer. And so I think it's worth saying this, that we don't quickly take back the keys when things go wrong. We debrief and invite transformation. You know, I've never parented a teenager, but I can imagine being a teenager. Every year, it's harder to imagine, by the way. Turned 40 a week ago or something, and I was like, oh, I remember when I used to think 40 was, less than young, we'll say today. Here we are, a little gray in the chin and hair, but whatever. But I do remember, there are those moments when you're a teenager, you just don't think all the time, like I didn't. And if you're a teenager, can we just be cool? I'm not trying to make fun of you. Sometimes we just don't always think through our choices. And, here's the deal. One parenting style would say, I gave them a chance. I gave them a shot. They totally blew it. So maybe when they're 18, we try again, right? And that's one approach. But I look at this story and I see something in Jesus. I see, Jesus actually takes the opportunity of a wrong, of a failure, and he makes it way more than just a failure. He actually makes it an opportunity. Debriefing our experiences with people who are under our care, whatever that looks like, be it a discipleship, mentoring relationship, be it a child, we have the opportunity not to just leave people and, I'm so disappointed in you, do better. Jesus doesn't do that. He'll name disappointment, but he actually comes alongside and says, hey, you want to debrief this? Here's the difference maker. The difference maker is prayer. In other words, what if you went and prayed yourselves? Transformation is possible. And so, if we really do want to be people who entrust the keys and trust that Jesus can unlock the potential, I want to give us some ideas here for home environments and then church environments. And then I want to ask you to do something. I want to ask you just to apply it in whatever way makes sense for you in this stage of life. And different weeks are going to feel like they apply to different people more or less. And I just want to name that reality. But who are you entrusting? Who are you empowering right now? And are you trusting that Jesus truly wants to unlock something in their life? So here's some thoughts about home life. In the home environment, if you're a parent, grandparent, or influence a home environment in any other way, model serving. Model serving. If you want to see your kids and the young people in your life develop, you have to decide that you're going to be a model of the kind of thing you hope they will also find. Jesus modeled well, right? So bring your kid with you if you're going to serve, or encourage them in their own kind of service. And then make sure that you're taking time after they're doing whatever they're doing in the context of loving people, loving God, that you take the time and say, hey, how did that go? What was that like for you? What went well? What was hard? Debrief it. You could also talk about your own experience of vocation. David talked about this 3 or 4 weeks ago when he talked about like our vocation as people in the kingdom of God. How is your vocation as a kingdom person informed by Jesus? And can you talk about it without sounding too preachy? You know what I mean? Don't use all the big words. Well, in my sanctification journey, young child. Like, just talk like a human. Is it cool? Like, I'm pretty sure Jesus talked like a human to his people, right? Like, so that's an option. Name gifts without manipulating. For parents of older kids, here's the deal. This is hard. I know this from just sort of experiencing the world, but here's what I'm guessing, is that you see something in your kids. Sometimes they don't see it in themselves, and you help call that out, and then you're like, hey, you're really good at school, go to med school. You're really good at school, do this thing I wish I would have done, right? Like, and med school's great, or that other thing might be great, but here's the deal. Make sure that you're calling out gifts and allowing enough space for Jesus to also be part of unlocking that potential. You follow? And then last one, get help when you need it. And here's the deal. You all need it. I need it. We need it. We need every person, every life stage informing how we walk this out, how we do this. We all need the help. And then part of the church here, I'll give you a few more thoughts and we'll wrap up. Be part of a church culture committed to empowering young leaders. By the way, I think that's what Brentview is already up to. Thank you. And let's keep going. Let's keep seeing the next generation be part of debunking the current trend. 1 and 2 doesn't have to be the stat we share 20 years from now. Be part of empowering young leaders. Build friendships. Like maybe you're like, how do I empower young leaders? Here's the deal. You might not do it in a formal way, but what if you just built relationships with people across generations, right? Whether they're younger than you, older than you, this can be part of the journey. And maybe even serve with them. That can be such a huge opportunity. And then champion opportunities for young people to develop and deploy their gifts in the church and beyond. Because friends, this is the work of Jesus. I'll close with this. Without getting into a lot of detail today, some of you know I did, in fact, have a pretty challenging childhood, we'll put it that way. And I can tell you this, that it was because the church didn't give up on me that I didn't give up on myself. My youth pastor, when I was in grade 10, was like, hey, why don't you go counsel at camp? Because I see something in you. And I was like, you see something in me? Really? Okay. And then I went to summer camp that summer and had this powerful experience with God that is literally the reason I'm on this stage right now. I felt God invite me into ministry as my job, as my life. Got invited to intern at a church after graduation, which was messy and hard, and I had no money ever. And yet, it was so bad at one point, by the way, my wife Lauren now, our first little date, which was like a hangout, we're like, hey, let's go hang out. Like, you want to go just grab some Taco Bell and talk or whatever? And I show up at the door, guess what she says? Hey, can we go to the Olive Garden? And I'm like, what? I had like $20 in my account, gang. I had to figure that one out. Anyway, right? Like these stages are also just really hard. So feed people. That could be your part in this, right? People just gave me food and hung out with me and took care of me. But here's the thing. I just want to say this. Like, when we hand the keys out, when we say we're going to empower young people, I know it works because I experienced it working. And not just in my life, but in the lives of so many other people. And so I invite us to imagine if we would truly, together, all of us, commit to ways that we can entrust keys to other people, to notice how Jesus wants to unlock potential in the lives of other people, and to just see what happens around us. And I can tell you this, I think it will look like God's kingdom in Calgary as it is in heaven. And friends, that to me is what family life as a church is ultimately all about. Let me pray. Jesus, thank you for your kindness. There's so much that we hold. It's hard being in family units. It's hard being a church. figuring out how to do all of this well together. Thank you that we're not left alone, but you, Holy Spirit, are with us. You care, that you are for us. Lord, we think about all of the things going on around us in our culture, in the globe. There's war, there's heartache, there's pain. There's wars going on in our families. There's wars going on in our hearts. And in Jesus, you are good. You invite your people to be the solution to a world of brokenness, not to be threatened by it, but to push back against the darkness, because that is what the power of prayer does in our lives, and that is what your power at work through us serving one another looks like. Jesus, we love you and we're so grateful for you. Help us to be part of a culture where we see the potential in others and we walk with them into newness, into possibility, into more and more of Jesus. Let's just give you all the glory, all the praise, Lord. Amen.